Laura had always believed that the world was too vast and too beautiful to be experienced from a single window. From the time she was a child, she would press her nose against the glass of her family's old station wagon, watching the landscape blur and shift as her parents drove through winding country roads. Those early memories planted something deep inside her, a restlessness, a hunger for discovery that no amount of comfort or routine could ever fully satisfy. So when she finally saved enough money to take a real trip on her own, she did not hesitate. She packed a single bag, bought a one-way ticket, and stepped into the unknown with nothing but curiosity and an open heart. Her first destination was a small coastal town she had read about in a travel magazine years ago. The article described it as a place where time moved differently, where fishermen still mended their nets by hand, and the smell of salt air mixed with fresh bread from the bakeries that lined the harbor. Laura had torn that page out and kept it tucked inside her journal ever since, waiting for the right moment. That moment had finally arrived. Arriving in the coastal town felt like stepping into a painting she had always admired but never expected to enter. The streets were narrow and cobbled, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and the buildings were painted in shades of white and pale blue that seemed to glow in the morning light. Laura walked slowly, deliberately, letting each detail sink in. She stopped at a small cafe near the water and ordered a cup of strong coffee and a pastry filled with almond cream. The woman behind the counter smiled warmly and asked where she was from, and for the next 20 minutes they talked about everything from the weather to the best hidden beaches nearby. That conversation set the tone for everything that followed. Laura learned that the most meaningful parts of travel were rarely the famous landmarks or the carefully curated tourist experiences. They were the unexpected exchanges, the moments of genuine human connection that happened when you slowed down enough to notice them. She spent 3 days in that town, exploring every alley, sitting by the harbor at sunset, and watching the fishing boats return with their daily catch. By the time she left, she felt as though she had lived there for years. From the coast, Laura made her way inland toward a mountain range she had only ever seen in photographs. The journey itself was an experience, a winding bus ride through valleys dotted with wildflowers and ancient stone villages that clung to the hillsides like barnacles on a ship's hull. As the altitude increased, the air grew cooler and cleaner, and Laura felt something shift inside her. The noise of everyday life, the constant hum of notifications and obligations, faded away completely. She arrived at a small mountain village just as the sun was beginning to dip behind the peaks, casting long golden shadows across the rooftops. Her accommodation was a simple room above a family-run inn, with wooden floors and a window that looked directly out onto the mountains. She stood at that window for a long time, watching the light change, feeling something close to awe. The next morning, she woke before dawn and hiked to a ridge that the innkeeper had recommended. Standing there as the sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and rose and deep violet, Laura understood something she had always known but never fully felt, that the world was generous in its beauty, and that all it asked in return was your full attention. Her next stop was an ancient city that had been continuously inhabited for over 3,000 years. Walking through its streets felt like moving through layers of time, each building and monument a chapter in a story that stretched far beyond any single human lifetime. Laura visited temples and markets, museums and hidden courtyards, spending hours simply wandering without any particular destination in mind. She discovered a small bookshop tucked into a side street, its shelves overflowing with volumes in a dozen different languages. The owner, an elderly man with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, recommended a book of local poetry that Laura bought immediately and began reading that same evening over a bowl of spiced lentil soup. The city had a rhythm to it, a pulse that she could feel beneath her feet as she walked. It was a place that demanded respect and rewarded patience, revealing its secrets slowly to those who were willing to look beyond the surface. Laura spent nearly a week there, and even then she felt she had only scratched the surface of what it had to offer. Toward the end of her journey, Laura found herself in a small village that was not in any guidebook she had ever read. She had heard about it from a fellow traveler she met on a train, a quiet woman named Rosa who described it as the most peaceful place she had ever visited. Laura decided to trust that recommendation, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions she made on the entire trip. The village was small enough that she could walk from one end to the other in under 10 minutes, but it was rich in the kind of quiet beauty that most people rush past without noticing. There was a garden at the center of the village tended by an old man named Giorgio, who grew roses in more shades than Laura had ever seen in one place. He invited her to sit with him one afternoon, and they shared a bottle of homemade wine while he told her stories about the village's history, about the families who had lived there for generations, about the festivals and the harvests and the long winters. Laura listened carefully, aware that she was being given something rare and irreplaceable, a glimpse into a way of life that was quietly disappearing from the world. On her final evening before heading home, Laura sat on a low stone wall at the edge of the village and watched the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. She thought about everything she had seen and heard and felt over the course of her travels: the coastal town with its warm cafe and harbor sunsets, the mountain ridge where the sunrise had taken her breath away, the ancient city with its layers of history and its hidden bookshop, the quiet village and Giorgio's garden of roses. Each place had given her something different, something she could not have found anywhere else. She opened her journal and began to write, not a summary or a list of highlights, but something more like a letter to herself, a reminder of who she had been before the trip and who she felt herself becoming. Travel, she wrote, was not about escaping life. It was about returning to it more fully, with wider eyes and a deeper capacity for wonder. She closed the journal, looked up at the stars, and smiled. She was already thinking about where she would go next.